Welcome to the Media Pros Show, the show that gives you quick, simple tips to grow your business by serving as an expert on your topic in the media. Learn how to get all the TV, radio, podcast, newspaper, magazine, and online interviews and appearances that you want, and learn how to be great in those media appearances. I'm Dr. David Geyer, orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and media medical expert. I help people who run businesses in all industries, whether it's healthcare, real estate, financial, legal, and many, many others. And when people reach out to me, when I interact with people that are trying to get involved in the media, the one that they instantly think of as far as growing their business is TV. And that potentially makes sense when you watch the local news in your market and you see ad after ad for attorneys. The next one you probably think of is radio, because you're trying to grow your business in a particular city, and most radio advertising is local. But what I want to talk about today is why you should use podcasts to potentially grow your exposure, to grow your media. Now, when I was writing my first book, and I've got other books that I'm sort of thinking about doing, but my first book that came out in 2017 was called That's Gotta Hurt: The Injuries That Changed Sports Forever. If you're watching the video version of this podcast on YouTube, you see it in the background there. It's a book that I spent about 3 years writing and really, really loved it. Well, the publisher for that book did a marketing campaign and, got me radio gigs and some other things to help me promote my book. But I really believed it'd be great to get my exposure to my book by being an expert talking about my book on podcasts, sports podcasts, exercise podcasts, fitness, health podcasts, and things like that. So I decided to basically create my own campaign to talk about my book on various podcasts. So one day I spent about 6 hours doing some research on sports and fitness and exercise and health podcasts, looking at all the podcasts out there in the different directories, try to figure out who their audiences were, which ones actually interviewed guests on their show, and most importantly, which ones seemed to have an audience that would be best for the nature of my book. And I found 33, and I jotted notes for each of those, what types of guests they had, what they talked about. I found contact information for the podcast or the podcast host. And again, took about 6 hours one day doing that. Then it was early on a Thursday morning before work, so really early. I spent about 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours, so I got up pretty early and wrote pitches basically that I could email to each of the hosts of those 33 podcasts. And each pitch was different. It was based on a template, but I changed it based on, the nature of their show and maybe some talking points I thought would be applicable to one particular show, guests that, shows had in the past that I might be similar to, and sent those 33 individualized pitches early one Thursday morning. Go to work, come home, check my email after work at the end of the day. By the end of the day, Thursday, 15 of those 33 had already responded, inviting me to be a guest on that show. And over the next 2 weeks or so, 3 weeks, I ended up doing 17 podcast interviews based on those 33 pitches, 17 interviews where I got to talk about my expertise, orthopedic surgery, sports medicine, and yes, talk about my book and potentially market my book. It was tremendous exposure, really without that much of an investment of work. It was really, really helpful. Now, when most people think about podcasts, they think about entertainment. After all, 90 million Americans have listened to a podcast episode in the last month alone. But it's much more than just entertainment. If you're trying to grow your business, podcasts can be tremendously helpful. Let's just say you're a real estate agent and you're located in, let's say Topeka, Kansas. Now, the idea that you might go to a podcast directory, whether it's Apple or Spotify or Google or any of those, and find a podcast for real estate in Topeka, Kansas, you're probably not going to find that. Maybe you will, and if you happen to find it, that's the exception rather than the rule. But you're going to find a ton of podcasts on real estate, some applying to people looking to buy homes or buy commercial property or sell homes or commercial property, or to real estate agents. But the thing is, you can target your ideal client or your ideal customer very, very specifically with podcasts. Again, it may not be real estate in Topeka, but you can, if you reach out to certain podcasts, can be interviewed as an expert on, let's just say, a podcast for real estate agents. And then that positions you as an expert in the real estate industry. Then once you do that podcast, you can promote it on all your social media accounts. And when it goes live, you can take the audio and put it on your website. Then people looking to work with a real estate agent, say they're looking to buy a home or sell a home, they research different real estate agents, they go to your website, they see that you've been interviewed on this real estate podcast, immediately giving you expertise and credibility as an expert, as a potentially much more knowledgeable real estate agent than somebody else. After all, in your market, you're the one being interviewed, not any of your competition. So it's really, really helpful. The second reason I would tell you that podcasts are really helpful for growing your business is that podcasts are a one-on-one media. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let me show you what I don't mean. When you're watching TV, let's just say a sitcom one night, maybe you and your kids, you and your family are in the living room together watching that show. When you're listening to the radio, you may be driving around town running errands, you have the kids with you, all of you are kind of listening. It's not personalized. But think about the last time you listened to a podcast. You're alone driving to work or driving home from work. You're at the gym. Maybe you have, AirPods on or headphones while you're shopping for groceries, or you're doing errands around the house. It's very personal. The host, you feel like at least the host is talking to you. Right now, I'm talking to you, or at least it feels like I'm talking directly to you. That conversation between the podcast host and the guest and you listening is very intimate. It's a very personal thing. There's not tons of people around. You don't hear an audience. It feels like you're getting a window into this conversation between the two of them, and that's very, very powerful. The third reason I'd tell you it's great to be a guest on a podcast is it's easy. After all, being interviewed on a podcast doesn't take nearly as much work as you creating content yourself. Now, one of the things we're going to talk about going forward on this show is that you really want to be seen as an influencer in your industry. So you definitely need to be writing blog posts about topics in your industry on your website. Maybe you consider hosting a live social media stream on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. Maybe you host a podcast yourself. Maybe you write guest articles on prominent sites in your industry, that other people write. All of those are good strategies, and you should do all of them. But they all take a lot of work. Being an expert talking about a particular topic in your industry is easy. I mean, this is what you do day in, day out. It may take you 15, 30 minutes to prepare based on what you and the host agree to talk about, but that's a lot easier than creating your own content. So that can be very helpful. The fourth reason I'd tell you podcasts are really helpful for growing your business is that you're going to develop a one-on-one relationship with the podcast host. This doesn't happen with the TV host or TV producer. This doesn't happen with the radio show host or producer, a journalist writing a newspaper column. Yes, you may get to do repeat interviews over and over, but with a podcast host, you're going to get to know them a little bit. And the thing about hosting a podcast is people from all over reach out to you with their problems, hoping you can help them. And what may happen if you're a guest on a podcast, especially if you have some expertise maybe that host doesn't have, they may know people, they may know customers and clients who need problems that you can solve directly. So they may actually say, hey, this is not what I do. When they're responding to questions they get, this isn't really what I do, but you might reach out to so-and-so. He was on my podcast or she was on my podcast, and that's exactly what he or she does. Here's your contact information to get in touch with them. So they can be a great source of referrals and of clients. But also those podcast hosts tend to be fairly connected because they interview lots of people. So they may know other podcast hosts of people in your industry or people who create blogs and websites in your industry. And those connections can be very, very helpful. And then the final reason podcasts are helpful, and honestly, this is probably the biggest reason when you're talking about growing your business and getting more exposure for your business, and that's when you're on a podcast, you get basically to promote yourself and potentially even sell. Now on TV, you can't sell at all. That's a cardinal sin. At the very most on TV, you're going to get your name and maybe the name of your business on the chyron at the bottom of the screen. Now on radio, you probably are going to get to promote yourself in the last 10, 15 seconds of an interview. You just get to say, hey, this is what I do. This is, how you can find me, website, phone number, whatever it is. But think about, again, when people listen to the radio. Most of the time, they're driving in their car. By the time they get to work, they've forgotten all about your business. They've forgotten your website address or your phone number. And, honestly, when they're driving, they don't have a pen to write it down. And radio is an audio medium. They're not going to see, your website address at the bottom of the screen. Now, podcasts are audio as well, but most podcast hosts will put your website address or links to you on social media in the description for that podcast episode that appears on your phone. And so people can see it and potentially find you. If they don't do that, at the very least, they will put your information on the episode, the website, we'll have a link to that particular podcast episode, and we'll put your information there. And very likely we'll put some of the information that you discussed. And that can be very, very powerful. But you might actually get the chance to sell. I told you in my podcast interviews that I did for That's Gotta Hurt, at the end of that interview, I told them a little bit about my book and basically where you could find it, and sort of crafted that little spiel based on the nature of the podcast and who would be listening. But I got to pitch that podcast, and it led to a lot of sales of the book. But even if you don't get to sell, and some podcast hosts don't really want you to sell, a lot will, but maybe some won't, you can at least offer something of value to start building relationships with those customers, potential customers, with that audience. You might give away a free coaching call with you, like what I do on this podcast. You might give away a free ebook that offers tips to solve a particular problem in your industry. You might give away a discount to your products and services. There's all sorts of things that you can potentially give away. But by giving something away, you tie that to signing up for your mailing list, basically. And then on a regular basis, and we'll talk more about mailing lists going forward as well, but on a regular basis, you send out helpful content about topics in your industry, whether they're podcasts, that you host and podcast episodes, or articles that you've written, or helpful tips. And then every now and then, you pitch your products and services. And remember, these are warm leads. These are people who care about your particular industry. There's nothing like it in TV, in radio, newspapers. I mean, there are niche websites, again, writing guest articles and things like that. Articles for sites that are very, very specific to a particular industry. But podcasts, again, back to our real estate example, only people who really care about real estate, whether they're agents or they're looking to buy or sell a home, are going to be listening. So it may be a small number of people, it may not be millions, but that 200 or 300 people, they very much care about what you're talking about. And if they like the stories that you tell and the information that you give and how you give it, they're very likely to take you up on whatever that free offer is. They're likely to obviously sign up for your mailing list in doing so and be much more receptive when you do pitch your product and service. And that is something you will not get in any other media. Smaller audience, potentially though, much more warm audience, receptive to what it is you do and what it is you offer. Now, please remember, this is not specific business advice. It's not financial, legal, medical advice. I don't give specific advice. If you have specific problems in your business, you need to talk to a specialist to help solve those problems. But if you want to grow your presence in the media, if you want more interviews that will get you customers, clients, patients, hopefully get you more customers, clients, and patients, hopefully grow your business, hopefully make you the go-to expert in your industry, hopefully even get you recognized when you're out in public. People coming up to you saying, "Hey, I heard you on that podcast. You were great, and I loved the tips that you gave about, whatever it was." I can help you do that. I can help you become a media pro. Go to MediaProsCoaching.com. Sign up for a free 30-minute strategy call with me, and we'll talk about where you are in your business and what you're trying to achieve, and try to figure out some simple strategies that you can use to get some interviews to get you started growing your business by being in the media. And while you're on the website, get my free ebook, The Media Pros Interview Checklist. It's a simple, handy reference, 20, 30 tips, regardless of what media your next interview is. These are tips for you to be great so that that producer, that reporter, that journalist asks you back for interviews over and over and over. And remember, this is a journey to become a media pro. It doesn't happen instantly. It takes practice, it takes effort. But on that journey, remember the words of former Success Magazine publisher and business mentor Darren Hardy. Do fewer things more often and get better at them.